o'clock. Good evening and welcome to Words of My Perfect Teacher Review. This is the book by Patrul Rinpoche that we have been reviewing and learning from. And this evening, we are going to be going over the section, which is section 2, part 2. And part of this will be reading, and part of it will be discussion. And then, as always, in the end, we turn off our recording and we have our discussion. And so I will begin with let's see what page we are on. A moment. So the title for chapter 2, part 2, is called Arousing Bodhichitta. So I want to just begin with the title. Sometimes especially Tibetan texts, the title is very important. Titles are always important, but within this context, we'll begin there. So on page 195, some people have an older version. This is what's called the newer version. So on chapter 2, on page 195, it says, Arousing Bodhichitta, the root of the great vehicle. So it's important to know that what we're looking into this evening is also a core principle, core qualities of our practice of Buddhism. And many of these topics, those people who have been doing Buddhist practice have heard before, have contemplated before. And in reading Patrul Rinpoche, we have an opportunity to hear what he has to say about these essential qualities. And he begins with, through your great wisdom, you have realized nirvana. Through your great compassion, you willingly embrace samsara. That means all of our lives here. And through your skill and methods, you have realized that they are no different. Peerless teacher, at your feet I bow. So Patrul Rinpoche is discussing, of course, there's a picture of Shantideva and also talking about Guru Rinpoche. So here we have something which I believe we all know, but it's said once again that wisdom, compassion, and skillful means are not different. So a lot of times we're looking for, well, how else can I help someone? What can I do? Or what can I aspire to do? But here we have the interlacing of wisdom, compassion, and skillful means. So let's take a look and see what Patrul Rinpoche is talking about. So he talks about bodhicitta as an aspiration and also an application. So our skillful means is the application, and our aspiration is quite noble, and we'll see what that is within each part. So the training is in what's called the 4 boundless qualities, and we have that in our Nundro practice. I raise Bodhi through 4 boundless states. And for people who've never practiced loving kindness or compassion, and we're going to get to this word, a little bit different word for equanimity, making that shift to the four boundless states is huge, because many people are reactive. Many people have a lot of liking and disliking. Maybe we do too. And so we're functioning from kind of a knee-jerk way of being. But when we're talking about bodhicitta, we're talking about, it's kind of like steering a huge ship and making a turn. So we're making a huge turn to live in a different way, to embrace different qualities, and really to come into greater happiness through the four boundless states. And the four boundless states are a force for good. And as Patrul Rinpoche says, the focus is still enlightenment. And that's very important to remember. So the first of our building blocks, I'll call them building blocks, is on page 196. And so many of us have heard for a very long time about the word equanimity, but Patrul Rinpoche uses the word impartiality. And that has a different feel than equanimity. And of course, my whole early training was totally equanimity. So reading this word impartiality makes a shift for me. So when we are reading on page 196, what we're talking about is a way, because impartiality is a way of giving up hatred of enemies. It's a way of giving up infatuation of friends and attachment to those close and aversion to those distant. And again, for some people, this is huge. It's a huge shift, because we're very used to only being around people we want to be around, not being around people we don't want to be around. And I'm not saying that we're going to go out and, embrace everyone we see, but rather it's an inward mental shift. That's what it is. And the skillful it's very important to remember the skillful means involved includes wisdom and compassion. So the four boundless states is also about the freeing of attachment and the freeing of aversion. Again, when we're starting out for our Buddhist practice, the freeing of attachment and the freeing of aversion is huge. And it takes a lot of attention, and it also takes a lot of contemplation. Even thinking, do I really want to do that? And so I know when I was first learning about equanimity or impartiality, it was really through the meditation on physical sensations, because my practice was feeling the sensations as I moved my attention through the body. And as we know, we have painful feelings, we have pleasurable feelings, and we have neutral feelings that sometimes we don't even pay attention to. But the training in recognizing pleasurable, not pleasurable, or neutral with equal attention is very empowering. And that, for me, was a very strong way, important way to come towards a greater impartiality. And of course, we might say, well, why do we want to do that? And again, because impartiality is really the foundation for the kind of love and compassion and sympathetic joy within Buddhism. So impartiality really is the ground building block for that. There's a very nice paragraph I mentioned before that there is a book called A Guide to the Words of My Perfect Teacher. And it looks like this. And so the author here, Khenpo Nawang Pelzing, has on page 135. I don't know if you have this book, but it's an interesting companion book for this Words of My Perfect Teacher. And first there is an aspiration, a prayer, which says, may bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, precious and sublime, arise where it has not come to be. And where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish evermore and evermore. Very simple, very beautiful. And then he explains, in the first place, bodhicitta, precious and sublime, is the wish that all sentient beings attain Buddhahood. So our foundation, once again, is with that wish, with that aspiration. The method for making it arise where it has not yet come to be is to train the mind in the 4 boundless qualities, just what we're talking about this evening. The method for making it never fail, but grow and flourish evermore, is to arouse the supreme bodhicitta and to train in the precepts of the bodhicitta. So we should practice these methods for making it arise where it has not yet come to be, for preventing it from declining where it has arisen, and for making it not fail, but flourish more and more, either in a detailed way with the 4 boundless qualities, or in a less detailed way with love and compassion, or simply compassion alone. So when we hear about Buddhism, when we hear about Buddhist practice, we most likely hear about love and compassion. And now we know that impartiality is the ground for love and compassion. And this love is one without attachment. So I think that many of our love stories are about attached love. And in Buddhism, there's a more expansive mind where there's an embrace, again, mentally, of all sentient beings. Now, it might not start out that way. So we might not go, oh yes, I love everyone. But we begin, as Patrul Rinpoche talks about, individually. He doesn't talk about loving all beings. He talks about starting with one and then letting that expand. So the 4 boundless states, again, are methods of evoking bodhicitta. And when we talk about bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, we always remember that they are also innate qualities. So when we're talking about the evoking, we're evoking that which underlying already is. And we use reflection, and we reflect on, sometimes we reflect on enemies. There was one sentence he put in there. He goes, you know, you think somebody's your opponent, and then come to find out they don't see you as an opponent. And I thought that Patrul Rinpoche was very humorous that way, because a lot of times what's in our own thoughts really might not be in somebody else's thoughts. So when we are going to think about people. And the other thing I really like that Patrul Rinpoche does in this book is that he has this very interesting method for working with anger. So he doesn't say, oh yes, go out, love your enemies, which is, you know, certainly fine if you can do it. But if you can't do it, what Patrul Rinpoche says, can you move that person into neutral? So many times in our lives, we have people that we like very much. There are people we don't like. There's a lot of people we don't pay attention to. Those are the neutral people. And so Patrul Rinpoche is saying to us, okay, there's the enemy, and let's do a little reflection. So what Patrul Rinpoche does is that he starts to let us know that we are functioning within many lifetimes. That this person that right now we're calling our enemy may not have been our enemy in the past. They may have been a kind parent. They may have been somebody who helped us do something. Right now, we are not liking them, but there's a phrase that I really like in Buddhism. It says, friends become enemies and enemies become friends. And again, that's over lifetimes. And, hopefully we're getting to a point in our practice that we don't have, in quotes, friends and enemies, but taking it from where it is, we work with that. So this whole idea of having perspective of different lifetimes is incredibly important. And those people trained in Buddhism do that, open their minds quite often to that. And in words of my perfect teacher, Patrul Rinpoche tells a couple of very well-known stories that you can read about how people are interrelated in their lifetimes with an S. And I remember one time, a long time ago, there was a teacher who came to the United States, very renowned Burmese master named Mahasi Sayadaw. And he was a teacher of mine, and I ordained at his monastery in Burma and Rangoon. And so while we were at a retreat, a friend came up and he said, can you introduce me to Mahasi Sayadaw? I want to ask him a question. And he was somebody who taught quite broadly on the topic of death and dying. And I thought, well, this could be really important. And so I introduced him to Mahasi Sayadaw, and we were actually outside standing and talking. And so my friend, Dharma friend, asked Mahasi Sayadaw this question about death and dying. And so Mahasi Sayadaw's response was, which lifetime? Because he saw things in lifetimes. And I thought, how amazing is that? So it's very important for us too to open up our minds, because sometimes they get really narrow, oh, that person or this happened and I'm upset about this. But when we really open our minds, we see that, oh, so many lifetimes, and we've had so many different relations with this person. And in traditional Buddhist texts, they say that everyone has been our mother, and that we're very blessed to have this life, and that mothers bring us into life, and that we need to be grateful. So that brings up a whole other perspective. Am I really going to be grateful to this person who's so annoying? Something to think about, correct? And then we come into page 198, which I think I'm going to read the whole page. It was just an incredibly well explained page. So page 198, and I am going to start, just going to read the page. I just liked it. And so it starts on the top where it says, first, towards all those you do not like at all, those who arouse anger and hatred in you, train your mind by various means so that the anger and hatred you feel for them no longer arise. Now, that may be difficult. Anger is a pretty strong emotion, but this is what Patrul Rinpoche is saying we need to do. So he gives some skillful means. Think of them as you would of someone neutral. And here's that shift. Here's that skillful mean. Think of them as neutral. Someone neutral who does neither good nor harm. Then reflect that the innumerable beings to whom you feel neutral have been your father or your mother, sometime during your past lives, throughout time, without beginning. So right now, Patrul Rinpoche is talking about beginningless time. Meditate on this theme, training yourself until you feel the same love for them as you do for your present parents. Now, not everyone has great relationships with their parents, but many do. So perhaps that word could be substituted for someone that there's a very loving relationship with. Finally, meditate until you feel the same compassion towards all beings, whether you see them as friends, enemies, or in between, as you do for your own parents. And again, parents are the cornerstone here, but that word could be substituted for someone very dear. Now, it is no substitute for boundless impartiality, just to think of everybody, friends and enemies, as the same, without any particular feeling of compassion, hatred, or whatever. That is mindless impartiality. So Patrul Rinpoche does not want us having mindless impartiality. Thank goodness, because that brings neither harm nor benefit. The image given for truly boundless impartiality is a banquet given by a sage. When the great sages of old offered feasts, they would invite everyone, high or low, powerful, weak, good or bad, exceptional or ordinary, without making any distinction whatsoever. Likewise, our attitude toward all beings throughout space should be a vast feeling of compassion, encompassing them all equally. Train your mind until you reach such a state of boundless impartiality. That could go on for a while, but that is our task. And that is because we're opening the Buddha mind, we're opening the Buddha Bodhichitta, and we're training in the impartiality, the loving kindness, the compassion, and then we'll get to the sympathetic joy. So here he's saying that any of this without compassion, will not do us any good. So then we begin number 2, meditation on love. Through meditating on boundless impartiality as described, you come to regard all beings of the 3 worlds with the same great love. The love that you feel for all of them should be like that of parents taking care of their young children. They ignore all of their children's ingratitude, all the difficulties involved, devoting their every thought, word, and deed entirely to making their little ones happy, comfortable, and cozy. Likewise, in this life and in all our future lives, devote everything you do, say, or think to the well-being and happiness of all beings. And this too is a huge shift to really devoting oneself to the happiness of others. And again, that's not a blind activity. We're not going to go around, are you happy? Can I make you happy? No. Remembering that the composite is wisdom and compassion and skillful means. All those beings, and this I always find as key. All of those beings are striving for happiness and comfort. They all want to be happy and comfortable. Not one of them wants to be unhappy or to suffer. Yet, they do not understand that the causes of happiness is positive action, and instead give themselves over to the 10 negative actions. Their deepest wishes and their actions are therefore at odds. In their attempts to find happiness, they only bring suffering upon themselves. And here is exactly where the Buddha was when he at first decided not to teach. He said, no, nobody's really going to understand this. You know, and then it was the heavenly beings who said, oh, could you look again? Because there are some people who have thin veils of ignorance. So this whole idea of people wanting happiness, but creating suffering. Okay. And okay, so we go to this loving kindness, love, and loving people impartially. So that's a little different than, you know, love stories, but loving people impartially, it has a whole different power to it, because it's not identifying one person, oh, you're the loving person, but it is actually expanding our own hearts is what we're doing, and embracing everyone with that loving kindness. And this is, again, traditionally recognizing that all people seek happiness. And this is going to be the same for people who are our enemies. It's a very interesting thing. You know, they actually want to be happy. And for neutral people, they also want to be happy. I gave myself an exercise one time, a number of years ago, that I rode a bus, and on the bus, I would see people, I had no idea who they were, and they would be walking down the street, and I would watch them, and I would say, you know what? That person really wants to be happy. And then I gave myself another added phrase, and I said, and somebody who raised them wanted them to be happy. And then the people who were neutral people, I felt much warmer to them. Wow, here's somebody walking down the street who really wants to be happy. And then we can very easily extend our wishes that may they be happy. So on in the middle of page 199, oh, here it says, from the way of the Bodhisattva, kind of on the bottom of the second paragraph, whenever catching sight of others, look on them with open, loving heart. So I was teaching myself that on the bus ride as I was watching people walk down the street. And again, what helped me was thinking they just want to be happy. And then there's also a quote about how to pray. Pray, and this is about four paragraphs down. It says, pray again and again with these words. Throughout all my lives, may I never harm so much as a single hair on another being's head, and may I always help each of them. And again, this word help, you know, it may be that we help just in that we have a positive attitude. It may be that we help that one person feels that they're in the environment of safety. There's many ways that we help. It doesn't mean that we have to go running around What's wrong? I'll help you. It doesn't actually mean that. Again, we're talking skillful means, and skillful means has a lot to do with bringing people wisdom and bringing people to enlightenment. Okay. And then this is also super important. It says it's particularly important to avoid making anyone under your authority suffer by beating them, forcing them to work too hard. And this applies to servants, animals, and under all circumstances. So I remember, and probably some of you do as well, that there was, I don't know if it was a picture or a video of the Dalai Lama, that every time he stays in a hotel, when he used to travel and give lots of lectures, he would always have all the people from the staff line up, anybody who helped, change the bedclothes or sweep the floor or any of the cooks. And he would just thank each one of them, recognizing how much they contributed to his stay and to his trip. So again, this is bringing awareness to all people on whatever level we perceive them at. And on the top of page 200, it says anything you can do physically, verbally, or mentally to help your own parents. Patrul Rinpoche spends a lot of time on elders. Anything you can do to help your own parents, especially on those who are suffering from chronic illness, will bring incredible benefit. And he says to be kind to those who have come from afar, to those who have been ill for a long time, to our parents in their old age, is equivalent to meditating on emptiness, of which compassion is the very essence. In Samye Chimpuk in Tibet, in a place that we've mentioned before, there is a rock, and it's the rock where Princess Pemensal hit her head and died, the daughter of King Trisandetsu. And it's said that if you touch this rock, you repay the kindness of your parents. So I had the opportunity to touch that rock. And Patrul Rinpoche goes on, and he talks about, and I think this is very important for us to reflect on, is really the treatment of elders. It's a time when people, it's hard for them to take care of themselves. And so we're called upon to do a lot. And then it says, do not make old people distressed. Look after them with care and respect. And he said it's from a quote of Padmasambhava, the great master of Odhiyana, as we know that is Padmasambhava. In whatever you say, do, be kind to those older than you, take care of them, and do whatever you can to please them. And this is so important that he is emphasizing the kindness throughout all phases of our lives, really. And so we move on to a meditation on compassion, and that begins on page 201. On page 200, he talks about the parents, and then on 201, he talks about meditation on compassion, and it's number 3. And he says the meditation on compassion is to imagine beings tormented by cruel suffering and to wish them free from it. So, as you know, Patrul Rinpoche is not naive. He states that all suffering is resultant karma. So we're never without knowing that. And also, as the great master Thich Nhat Hanh always said, do not turn your eyes from suffering. And so the ability to look directly at suffering is also generating the ability to be compassionate, meaning to wish that that suffering no longer happens to that person. And Patrul Rinpoche does talk about, again, beginning with individuals and then going to compassion for all beings. So he says that's very important to start with one person. He spends, Patrul Rinpoche spends from page 201 to 203 talking about the suffering of animals. And again, this is from originating from a society that shepherds animals, that slaughters animals, eats animals, and also moves animals from one place to the other. And it really is very graphic in terms of the kind of suffering that animals bear. And to really think about actions towards animals as well as people. I know in my own experience, I had actually a very intense experience. I went in with a friend on, this was years ago, a very large piece of, I think it was beef. And we had it in the fridge and we would, eat the beef for lunch or dinner. And it was the same, larger piece from a butcher. And one night I woke up in tears and I began to have the experience of what it was like for that animal, knowing it was going to be slaughtered and walking up this plank and hearing cries and also having a child as an animal with it. And it was unbearable. And I realized it was from that piece of meat. And, I became a vegetarian from then on. But Patrul Rinpoche spends pages talking about this kind of experience. And I know that the Karmapa has talked a lot about this. And then Jigme Lingpa in his lifetime also became a vegetarian and also talked about animals. So it's not to say that one, because we're in a society that does eat meat, and certainly Tibetan culture eats meat, yak meat especially. But what Patrul Rinpoche is saying is look at the suffering involved and anything you can do to lessen the suffering and have compassion for the animal to do that. So on the top of page 210, I decided not to read all the descriptions. They're very difficult, believe me. Do read them, but it's very difficult. So yeah, I skipped over those, that. But on the top of page 210, Patrul Rinpoche says that, or he's quoting actually the sutra that perfectly encapsulates the Dharma says, let those who desire Buddhahood not train in many dharmas, but only one. Which one? Great compassion. Those with great compassion possess all the Buddha's teachings as if it were in the palm of their hand. So compassion looks directly at suffering. Looking directly at suffering, we see a lot. We see cause and effect. We see the wisdom of all that arises passes away. We understand emptiness because great compassion does. So the one Dharma. And then to round out everything, impartiality, love or loving kindness for all sentient beings, beginning one at a time. Compassion, the wisdom of suffering and emptiness. And then comes the meditation on sympathetic joy. And I'm going to read the beginning of sympathetic joy in the instruction. So number 4, meditation on sympathetic joy. Imagine someone of noble birth, strong, prosperous, and powerful. Someone who lives in the higher realms, experiencing comfort, happiness, and a long life, surrounded by many attendants and in great wealth. Without any feeling of jealousy or rivalry, make the wish that they might become even more glorious. This is Patrul Rinpoche. Enjoy still more of the prosperity of the higher realms, be free of all danger, and develop ever more intelligence and other perfect talents. Then tell yourself again and again how wonderful it would be if all other beings could live at such a level too. So this is seeing someone who has everything. And Patrul Rinpoche, who is a wandering mendicant, says, imagine that they have even more. And relish that may all beings have more. What an attitude. But that's what it takes to raise the awareness, to make that aspirational wish. May all beings be happy. And may all beings be peaceful. And may all beings be enlightened. And to cultivate these qualities of love, compassion, based on impartiality, and to have sympathetic joy, the elevation of it all. Remarkable. So when in our Longqing Ningtig Nun show, at first, people were baffled, may we all become a great guru, right? But the great guru is also making that wish, that aspiration for that elevation of spirit, the elevation of humanity. May what one person experiences as abundant, may everyone experience as abundance. What an attitude. So, and when we look at what keeps us from that, we do have to take a look. A lot of times it is comparison. Oh, I might want that. Or why do they have that? Or it might be a little bit of judgment. Oh, do they really need that? So Patrul Rinpoche doesn't say that. He says, may we all have that. And so that's very different than comparing or, making decisions for other people and so forth. but rather the whole uplifting of the spirit. And that's, may we all become a great gurus, and may we all help to uplift our society. May we all help to have less anger in the world, less rage, less jealousy. Can we cultivate these qualities of love, impartiality, sympathetic joy, compassion? And again, it's all based in wisdom. It's all based in the Dharma. It's all based in understanding. So, in completing a bit on the last 2 pages, before we're going to start next time we'll be on page 218 with part 2, Arousing Bodhichitta. But right now we're into our definitions. So to complete, on page 214, the second paragraph, which is attributed to Milarepa. Even if the Buddha himself were present in person, there would be nothing he could do to guide a jealous person. So jealousy of what somebody else has blocks the mind. It says, a mind tainted with jealousy cannot see anything good in others. Again, another reason for sympathetic joy, because jealousy blocks the mind. Being unable to see anything good in them, it cannot give rise to even the faintest glimmer of faith. Without faith, one can receive neither compassion nor blessings. So again, another reason for sympathetic joy, it opens us to receiving blessings, and blessings really, as we are learning, elevates our path. And then at the bottom of page 214, constantly dwelling on feelings of jealousy and competitiveness neither furthers one's own cause nor harms our rivals. So it's kind of pointless, is what he's saying. And then on the top of page 215, the first paragraph, the image given for boundless sympathetic joy is that of a mother camel finding her lost calf. Of all animals, camels are considered the most affectionate mothers. If a mother camel loses her calf, her sorrow is correspondingly intense. But should she find it again, her joy knows no bounds. That is the kind of sympathetic joy that you should try to develop. So we want to develop the sympathetic joy of the mother camel. And then the last inserted paragraph on page 215 at the bottom, if the intention is good, the levels and path are good. If the intention is bad, the level and paths are bad. Since everything depends on intentions, always make sure they are positive. So with that, we complete our evening with positive intention and the aspiration and also the skillful means for impartiality, for love, loving kindness, for compassion, and for sympathetic joy. Thank you.